welcome to the channel, everyone. So this is my first ever video, full-length video that I'm going to do on YouTube. So I want to kind of put that up there out front, just because some of the camera angles aren't ideal. So luckily in this video we'll talk a lot about the fishing, and I'll have some stills, and we'll still get some good footage. So I wanted to include this. So in this video I'm fishing with a couple buddies of mine, Han and Louise. They're both competitive fly anglers like myself. They're much more active in the competition world, but that's where we met. So we're down in the Southern Oregon Lake, and we're going after rainbows, tigers, and browns, and we're going to do some Loch style fly fishing. Loch style fly fishing is might be new to you, but the idea is that we use a drogue, or what's essentially an underwater parachute, to help slow and control the drift of the boat, so that we can fish ahead of the drifting boat and approach flies first. You'll see it as we kind of do it. It's incredibly effective, as you'll also see. So it's really kind of a unique way of fishing, at least to most North Americaners, for sure. So I want to talk about some of the gear that we use before we kind of get into the fishing. So I have two rods in this video. I use both of them are 10-foot 6 weights. Both of them are from Echo. One's the Stillwater and one's the Lago. They're both phenomenal rods. The Stillwater is kind of their premier Stillwater rod from Echo, and the Lago is more of their mid-tier Stillwater rod. Again, both are great, but if you're looking for a premium experience, the Stillwater is where to go. But if you're new to Stillwater fishing and you kind of don't know if you're going to do it very often, but you still want to have the right gear, that Echo Lago is awesome. Huge fan of that rod. The lines that I'm using, I use only 2 lines out of my mini that I carry with me. I use the Airflo 6 cents 2 fast intermediate. That's what will be on the Stillwater rod. And then I use the Airflo Superflo sink tip, which is a 12-foot slow tip, and I use that on my Echo Lago. The reels I use is the Orvis Clearwater Cassette reel. It's a cassette reel that's only available. It's the only cassette reel distributed in the United States. All the other ones there's other ones from Airflo or Snowbee or Grays or other companies out there, but those are distributed outside of the United States, and they're slowly working their way in here in the United States. But Orvis is stateside, so that's kind of why I went with them. But it's awesome. The cassettes are easy to change and easy to make fly adjustments with, or line adjustments with. Flies, that's kind of the next thing that I'll talk about here. So on my pulling setup on my faster intermediate line, the fly that wins the day is the Thin Mint. I catch almost all my fish on that Thin Mint. Probably 80% of the fish of that day were caught on a Thin Mint. The rest of the fish were caught on that sink tip line, and there was a mix between a red 8-legged Apps worm, a red ice cream cone, and a Calabatus nymph. Kind of like a souped up hare's ear with a copper bead. But really the 2 flies that won the day was that Thin Mint and that Apps worm. As you can see, we're approaching the lake pretty soon here, and then we'll get right into kind of the drogue. You guys will see kind of the drogue being set up. It's a bit of a pain to deal with, but once you have it set up, it's really quite effective, and you'll see it kind of being deployed right there. I'm kind of watching to make sure it doesn't go anywhere, or I guess goes where we want it to go. And you can see Louise and Han on the boat ahead of me. So then we'll kind of get into the fishing here. So Louise hooks the first fish of the day. He catches his on these olive bugger style patterns with the chartreuse bead. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason to them, but they just tend to be kind of they tend to be a really good fly. Chartreuse beads tend to be a really good thing to have with you when you're fishing still waters, and they work well here. My fly, on the other hand, has this light pink metallic bead, which is my favorite, and that's what I hook up with here, is a Thin Mint with a light pink metallic bead. I have that on, I have a blob on, and I have a humongous on. The humongous comes off, the blob changes many times to different colors, but nothing seems to matter. It seems that they want the thin mint with either a gold or a light pink metallic bead. I bet it would work really well with the chartreuse bead, just haven't tried it yet. Maybe that'll be a 2025 experiment that I try. But these fish pull hard. These fish like to chase flies. So when they're around, they're mean and they pull hard. It's good to have a decent sized net in the boat for this, and luckily they had a good net, and Han was able to get that fish for me. And there he is. It was like an 18-inch rainbow, really healthy rainbow. It's definitely a fish from last year or the year before. They stock this lake extremely heavily, so I think they stock it with around 300,000 rainbows every year, and then anywhere between 20 to 40,000 tigers and browns every year. So it's really heavily stocked. 2024 they did 400,000 fish. 360 of them were rainbows, the rest were tigers and browns. So it is very heavily stocked. This lake is a food factory. One of the things that I've learned talking to biologists is this lake has on average around 400 pounds of benthic food per acre. And that may not sound like a lot, but a lake this size, you're looking at 1.2 million pounds of just benthic food in this lake available for the fish. So it is significant. These fish are all virtually footballs, very small heads, very small tails for the length of their bodies, and very fat bodies. So, a lot of fun in this lake. There's other things that these fish eat besides just benthic food. Benthic food meaning just food that lives in the bottom. So besides chironomids, annelid worms, and other things like that, there's a lot of scuds in this lake, and there's a lot of rough fish or forage fish. So they have a few tui chubs still swimming around, but they have a lot of golden shiners in this lake. And the fish in this lake become pescivores because of that. So they eat a lot of fish, they eat a lot of scuds, they eat a lot of chironomids, they eat a lot of worms, and they get fat and they get happy. So it's kind of fun to fish for fish like that. You can see how hard they pull. I tried fishing with 4X at one point throughout the day, seeing if I can do it with a little bit lighter line. It's impossible. They blast through 4X like it's not even there. So I fish this lake typically with 3X, 2X, or sometimes even 1X. So it's as I said, it's kind of a big fish factory. But because of all that food, they can be really tough. They can be really tough fish to catch because they don't need any food from you, from your flies, or from the other fly anglers that are on the lake. So they can be kind of tough to catch because of that. So as you can see, poor angles, you can see me trying to get flies out of the net. There's that blob. Even though the blob didn't catch any fish, I didn't take it off. A lot of people would want to take off that fly because you didn't catch any fish on it. Why bother having it on? But what it's doing is it's presenting my flies in a way that the fish find appealing. So I left the blob on. I just changed colors, hoping that at some point it might get me a bonus fish. It never does in this day. Everything that I do pulling is on the thin mint. You can see Luis and Han checking out my fish right there. So we're gonna motor out of here in a sec. You can see we're pretty close to, not the shore, but to this weed bed. Luckily it's all knocked down weeds from the wintertime. This is springtime when we're here, so it's pretty easy. I'm just gonna get all my flies out of the way, start the motor, and just motor out of there. And because they're pulling in the drogue, it makes it really simple. I can put us into gear and get going, and we'll set up for another drift and kind of just hit this bank over and over and over again. And that's what we did all day. So we'll get more into it on the next drift. So here on the next drift, we just keep catching more fish. Luis and I kind of take an early lead on the amount of fish that we catch. We catch quite a few. Here's me, another fish on a thin mint. Who would have guessed? But yeah, we fish it pretty hard, pulling flies. But the next kind of clip that's going to be coming up here after we show off this, after I hook and land this fish, is going to be Han's tiger trout. The tiger trout in this lake get really big really quickly. They have plenty of space to grow. They have plenty of food, and I mean, there are predators, there are osprey and eagles and everything. There's all those kind of things in the lake, but those are not really a factor for a fish once it gets about 20 to 26 inches, and that's kind of where we're at with Han's fish. And here we go, getting right into it. All right, so there's Han. Han hooked this fish, I believe, on the same fly that Luis was using, so an olive bugger with a chartreuse bead. Kind of has a little bit of gold in it, I think. It's hard to remember. This was over a year ago now, or almost a year ago since I was out on the lake. But you can see that fish. It is a big boy. It is quite the fish. I'll have some still images of it when Han, I get some pictures of Han holding it, so you'll be able to see the big old tiger. It's awesome. It makes this day totally worth it. I would recommend this to anybody, hands down. The problem is it's not easy. We're right up against the reeds again, and that fish could have hooked a second fly into the reeds. It could have blown the fly off on its own. The hook could have bent out. It could have been a big problem. So here's Han getting his hands wet, getting ready to pull the fish. Here we go. There you go. Big old male. Awesome shoulders on that thing. Big old lower jaw type. So now the method that we're doing, at least that I'm doing, is essentially kind of a pseudo washing line setup with that slow 12-foot long sink tip. I have a 3-fly rig on, about 5 feet apart, just like I did with my pulling setup. So it's a long leader, 15 feet, give or take. And I have, I think, a Calibatus nymph as my first dropper. As my second dropper is my ice cream cone, and then it is my point fly is an apsworm, an 8-legged red apsworm, and that has been kind of a sleeper fly for me. You just saw it kind of pop out just then. That was because we use barbless. I only use barbless hooks now for almost all my fishing. There's some fishing where I still use a barbed hook, but it's typically catch and keep fishing and when I go out and fish saltwater. But all my trout fishing is barbless, and so it's nice. As soon as there's no more tension on the fish, then it pops right out. But this method, as you'll see, becomes very, very, very productive. Washing line methods, if you haven't done it here in North America, it's super productive. And so that 8-legged apsworm slows the descent of the entire setup, and the flies just slowly go through the water column. Louise is using a bung or an indicator, and he catches a bunch of fish here as well. We'll kind of talk about that as it kind of comes up here. But yeah, the washing line method is super productive. But so is the bung. So is using an indicator. So you can see Louis just hooked up there. I think he catches this fish on a kind of like a Gasolina Perdigon, except for it doesn't have a tail. So it's pretty cool that he is able to get one on that. I think the rest of the fish he catches is on an apsworm that I tied. So I think coming up pretty soon here we kind of double up. But nice part about having a big boat, we rented the biggest boat we could, that we could fly fish out of. Means there's plenty of room for him to deal with fish, and for me to deal with fish, and for Han to deal with fish. This day was very productive for us. I think we caught over 60 fish. Luis and I each caught well over 20. And then Han caught the fewest fish, but he caught the biggest fish. I think Luis caught more than me. I might have caught more than him. It was really hard to tell by the end of the day. When he switched to the bung, instead of pulling flies, I started catching more fish. And there's our double. So, like I said, it's a very productive way of fishing. That was Luis's brown that he just netted right then and there. It was a great mixed bag. Caught tigers, browns, rainbows. Definitely got all three of the potential trout that we could catch in the lake, so that's really fun when that happens. But yeah, Some of the other things I kind of want to talk about in this is that don't be afraid to try different methods. I didn't go to the washing line method because the pulling method wasn't working. Pulling flies back was working. I switched to this to kind of change it up. It's way less active. It's way less exerting than pulling flies, so it makes it a nice little break for the afternoon. I think I did this after we went back for lunch. But you can see these fish pull really hard, so it was a great day of fishing. This was about a month after ice off in the lake. So the lake has already turned over. You can see how crystal clear the water is, and the fish are hungry and ready to rock and roll. I'll kind of talk a little bit more about the lock style fishing. So we have a drogue thrown out behind the boat right now that is slowing us. You can see the wind is blowing with our casts, which makes us cast a lot further, which is nice. It also means that the first thing the fish will see is our flies. And so the way I was fishing this method was casting out, pulling my line straight, so I just pull it until I know the flies are kind of all straight up instead of bunched together. I then just slowly pick up the line as the boat is approaching. So I'm just pulling in slack. I'm not actually moving my flies at all. It's just pulling up slack. And that allowed me to let my flies slowly descend into the water column. Every once in a while, I would go through and pop my flies a couple times, kind of raise them up in the water column, but usually I didn't even have enough time to do that, just usually on my first initial cast. And the best part is I didn't have to cast that far. I was probably casting 40 feet plus the leaders, so 65 feet total, pulling in line. So it's like a 50-foot cast and catching fish kind of right away. You saw me hand some flies to Han. I think I gave him some worms too, some apps worms, just because they're so productive. You've already seen pictures of them in here, but it's a really productive fly. I really like it in red, but amber, olive, purple, black, pink, and other variations work super, super well. I've seen some guys do chartreuse and orange, kind of as a combo, but red is my most productive color by far and away. So yeah, you can see me just hook up another one there. So yeah, we kind of go back and forth, back and forth. We were there all day at this lake, so it was a long day of fishing, but it was very productive, as you can see. I think this fish was on the Calabatus nymph. That Calabatus nymph, the only reason why I point that out is I don't think they ate it as a Calabatus. It's still really early in the season for Calabatus. The water's still pretty cold. It is in the low 50s, if I remember correctly. Because of that, I think they were eating it as a scud, if anything. I don't think they were eating it because it was looking like a mayfly nymph. As I said, this lake is known for its high scud populations. And when lakes have lots of scuds, fish love scuds. And that's something I want to fish more of this year, is more scud imitations, more scud patterns. I think in North America we don't fish very many scuds, or we think of them as kind of a second-rate kind of deal. So this is my last fish of the day, I believe. Again, when they eat on the washing line setup, it is like hooking a truck leaving the parking lot. They eat it so hard. It is so much fun. And to me, way more fun than staring at an indicator. Now, there are times when indicators do really, really well. As a sneak peek to the next video, I come back to this lake with a different friend, and that's how we catch all of our fish, is underneath indicators. And it's a lot of fun to do it. But you never kind of know until you try. And if I can help it, I kind of want to catch them without a bobber. It's much more active. you know, this is less active than pulling flies, but it's more active than watching a bobber. I think this fish ate an ice cream cone, so that's really fun. That fly is super simple to tie. It's just wire, thread, and a bead, and some coating to make sure it doesn't fall apart. But it's really, really, really effective, especially if you're kind of new to fly tying. So, to kind of recap everything we did here, we caught a lot of fish pulling flies, we caught a lot of fish on washing line, we also caught some fish underneath an indicator, underneath the bung. That was really fun. The flies that worked was a thin mint, an apse worm were our two top producing flies, and then there was other flies that caught fish, like that olive bugger with a chartreuse bead, ice cream cones, gasolinas, scud imitations. So really, really productive lake, really, really productive day of fishing. I'm going to be back here again, probably the same time of year in 2025, to hopefully rinse and repeat. But you never know. Like you'll see in the upcoming video, we go again literally a week later, and it is tougher fishing. So it all kind of just depends on the day. And that's kind of the deal with fishing. It's fishing, not catching, right? So you kind of have to know that going in. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. As I said, more will come out. I'll release videos on a pretty consistent schedule. But yeah, see you in the next one.